What should we make of this kind of potential of his resignation? Will it matter for the party? Take us through some of that.
Look, one thing we've learnt over the years is we talk about the things we know and we're cautious on the ones we don't. Our working assumption, because it was a thing we knew, is that the idea was that Mr. Ramaphosa exits towards the end of 2027, 2028, when the ANC's had a conference. We've read in the Sunday Times report that he's going to resign early next year or something. There's nothing that we know that suggests that is correct, and there's nothing we've been able to learn that suggests that is correct. So we stick with what we know, which was in 2027. I think that's when he's going. So, and I also believe that analysts such as, well, myself, shouldn't sit on the fence. Is he resigning early next year? I don't think so. I think he's going to stick around for another 2 years. That said, let's say he did go. It would be quite an odd decision for the ANC to take, because it's still not clear who will succeed him. We're developing a hell of a good view on that, though. We're not going to talk about it today, but we'll probably start talking about that perhaps in a few weeks' time. And we're getting a bit of a sense on what might be happening there, but it's premature. For the ANC, it would be a curious thing to let him go. Gabriel sent me earlier that I'm scrolling through here now. There's some data on Mr. Ramaphosa and his favorability. And in 2022, he was viewed favorably, so very favorably or somewhat favorably, by around 50% of all South African voters. And that's 2022. Now, he's at 46. It's pretty much the same number. And that's actually quite strong, given that people lose confidence in their leaders very, very quickly. But there is a dynamic in that number that Gabriel pointed out for me. In 2022, amongst ANC voters, 56% regarded Mr. Ramaphosa favorably or very favorably. And that number subsequently lifted. In 2024, we had it at 76%. Where we've got it now is at 84%. So he's gone up in the estimations of ANC voters. Now, we don't have the data in front of me now, but we've tested some of the potential rivals for ANC leader. And none of them rise to anything near this. I mean, a strong favorability score in South Africa for a politician, Gabriel, is about 20, 25, 26, 27. For him to sit amongst the ANC in the 80s, it's astonishing. And it would be mad for them to let him go now. More so for the fact that when we ask ANC voters why do they vote for their party, they give very few positive reasons. They've tended to say things like, well, we don't know if there's an alternative, our parents voted this way, we're worried about the ANC losing. The one almost positive they give, actually the only one remaining, is that Cyril Ramaphosa is there, and maybe there's something to that. So he's remained very strong amongst ANC voters. However, if you look at DA voters, 3-4 years ago, what was the number? 2022. 53% of DA voters had a positive impression of Mr. Ramaphosa, a positive sense towards him. And that number's essentially been cut in half to today. If he were to resign, beyond the favorability implications for his party, which ahead of the local government elections later in the year, where they're already in some trouble, they'll be in even deeper trouble. The sentiment shock to investor and just general opinion on South Africa will be very, very great. And that translates as sentiment changes, confidence changes, investment falls, the currency weakens, you get into all sorts of greater economic trouble than we already are, and you do that just before an election as well. There's also the argument to make that his cabinet clique around him, who have previously, it was a few years ago, he thought about perhaps giving it all up. And he was heavily leaned on by his own colleagues for some of the reasons I'm citing to you now, to stick around. And I imagine they'll be doing some leaning on him again. So, Gabriel, our call, no fence sitting. He's not leaving early next year. He's going to stick around for a few more years. That's probably the best thing for his party as well.
So, Frans, I want to pick up on a couple of things you said there. So, just on that point about the high favorability, the highest favorability I've ever seen of a non-ANC politician was Julius Malema in 2022 at 26%.
But just while you're there, I'm interrupting you, sorry. But I just saw something in your note to me. Amongst ANC voters, he's 84. Amongst black voters, he's 53. Do you see what has happened? As the ANC has shrunk, those that have remained in the party you've condensed that support for Cyril Ramaphosa in the party. And those that have left, very often, would be individuals who were skeptical about him to begin with.
Exactly. But I have a question on that, knowing that on some of the data that you're looking at, and it's maybe a double-pronged question, because I think we think at the Common Sense that the voters' view of Cyril Ramaphosa is rather misguided. That he seems to be a reflection of what people wish to see in him more than a substantial figure in and of himself. And so what should we make of, Cyril Ramaphosa?
Yeah.
And do you think that maybe his resignation, apart from being a kind of shock to voter sentiment inside of the ANC, that actually might have a positive impact in the longer term and in the broader sense in South Africa?
Oh, look, what do we make of him? I think, as in the case of many politicians, timing and luck are important. And had he inherited a country with a 10% unemployment rate and an economy growing at, let's say, the new target, 3.5%, and with sound enough institutions and enough electricity, he would have done what he does and probably been gone down as one of Africa's most successful leaders. But he inherited a very different situation. Electricity had run out, fiscal pressure was immense, his party deeply divided. These revelations that are coming out of this Madlanga Commission, which, I mean, even for those of us who thought we knew the depths of it, it's quite astonishing. But a deputy police commissioner's private security detail that went to the commission with him to guard him while he was testifying is made up of people including hijacking kingpins who are guarding the police general. Yeah, if Simon, if you seem to think you've had a stroke and I spoke incorrectly, that's what is being reported. He inherited that situation. And I think the nature of a person's important. And throughout his history, he's really appeared in South Africa 4 times. The first time was the great trade union leader, which was fine to say, but a lot of the credit for that had to go to the Anglo-American executives of that era, who took Mr. Ramaphosa after an earlier efforts at some misguided trade union activity and really shaped him into a catalyst to change the country. The second time you see him, he's the great negotiator who outfoxed the Nats, but the Nats weren't the brightest to begin with, and in any event, the real negotiations were Mandela to de Klerk. And Ramaphosa, like Rolf Meyer, who was his counterpart on the other side, played an important role. But Mandela was very brilliant, and Ramaphosa benefited from that. The third time you see Ramaphosa, he's this great industrialist who's, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk rolled into one. But the facts of it for anyone who was in business through that era knows that he positioned himself very well in the era of South Africa's early transformation thinking and benefited accordingly. And good for him. But the point is that the trade union leader, the great negotiator, the great industrialist benefited enormously from the circumstances and the counsel of some very, very capable and brilliant people. And when he became leader of South Africa, he didn't have that anymore. There wasn't a Julian Ogilvy Thompson to whisper in his ear, or a Mandela to do the same, or the likes of some of the real industrial kind of icons of the SA business environment. And his nature was not to be ruthless, but to try and find common ground, mutual understanding. And to do that in his party was fatal. And as a consequence, he's had a very hard time.